Hello everybody, I'm Aaron Sharp and welcome to Deadhead Animations.
Holy fuck, it's the day before the election and I have not even finished building my bomb shelter yet.
Spectacular! And as you can tell by the title, we have a great show tonight as this is going to be my very first response video. And unlike my other videos where I put an act on to play a character, I'm going to try to be completely genuine for this one. I don't expect to do these very often, so I thought it was appropriate to respond in kind. So first, I have a bit of a prelude going into this video that I think is important insight into the way that I, and I'm sure many people, view the skeptic community tend to think. And it's going to be a bit long-winded, so anyone who is just here for the political angle, please feel free to skip ahead to this timestamp. And for everybody else, let's get right into this. So I've been asked the question many times, what do you think of the skeptic community? And I think that my answer works well into the substance of this video. As many of you longtime viewers know, I was a rather unsuccessful tuber back in the day, and I guess because life got in the way, I left YouTube for about 4 years, and I returned around this time last year and found that the community was a little more divided than usual. I mean, it's always been pretty divided, but it was more so than usual now. And it almost felt as though I was being forced to pick a side, which seemed really stupid because the people on both sides I had watched for many years. But since I knew many people, including Steve on the so-called SJW side, I started watching their videos, and I tended to agree with a lot of what they were saying. Equality for women! Yeah, that sounds great! Justice for police brutality! Fuck yes, the job of a policeman is to protect the innocent! The censorship of social media to stop harassment and bullying! Yeah, fuck bullies! Wait, that was a bit vague. And also, I get kinda nervous when people want to censor speech online. How would you even enforce that? White people are all racist and should be forced to pay reparations. Okay, what the fuck? No. That's retarded. Hey, you can't say retarded. That's ableist. Seriously? I know I said I wasn't going to play a character, but I thought that was kind of worth it. I mean, according to everyone on Twitter, I'm a radical, leftist, commie, socialist cuckmangina shelling out left-wing propaganda alongside the JIDF. But this shit seemed a bit much to even me. But still, many of the people I knew in the SJW circle were not pushing for many of the more radical ideas, and in fact, many of the more libertarian-leaning individuals made compelling arguments onto why this was all oversensitive authoritarian nonsense. But it made me question what the people around me were saying. So, as a skeptic, I took a step back and started to pay more attention to the other side, the anti-SJW side, as it were. And it turns out that they were saying a lot of things that I agreed with as well. Freedom of speech should be upheld. Fuck yes it does. Kowtowing to oppressive ideologies for the sake of political correctness is regressive. Hell yes. Islam is oppressive as fuck to women. I will not discourage my followers from dogpiling and harassing people I disagree with. Yeah, wait. I said I hated bullies. And even though I know that you can't prevent this behavior from free-minded people in your audience, you could at least be decent and ask them not to be total cunts. Rape should be legal on private property. Oh, fuck you, I'm out. Hold on. Again, to be fair, the vast majority of the anti-SJW community would find those ideas completely fucking repugnant and insane. And it turns out that just like the S-Jews above, many of them have made compelling arguments onto why all of this is stupid, crazy bullshit as well. But again, it made me question what these people were saying too. And then it hit me. Well, it didn't actually hit me. I kind of knew this shit the whole fucking time, but for the sake of brevity, it hit me. And it turns out that when you put people into groups and make sweeping assumptions about large swaths of people, based on what a small yet vocal minority of radical individuals have to say, you inevitably generalize and mischaracterize everyone that you put into that perceived group. The thing is that you can't fit people into neat little boxes because everyone has their own dumbass opinion on all kinds of stupid, crazy bullshit. But the truth is that everyone kind of wants to fit into one of those little boxes nowadays. They want to sit in their echo chamber and never think critically about what they're being told. And I see that on both sides. And I know that it's because it makes them feel warm and safe. Turns out, reality isn't warm and reality isn't safe. The fact is that everyone wants a group to belong to, and that's natural. Humans have evolved a pack or tribe-like behavior, and grouping together when a perceived enemy is present is one of the most basic human instincts. But I urge anyone who is listening to not be motivated by fear or hatred of the quote, other side, because that's really just a fairy tale. And the only opinions anyone really has is their own, not the group. And the only way to discover those differences is to discuss them with people on an individual basis and not make sweeping assumptions about people you have never interacted with or even listened to their arguments firsthand. But I don't have to say this because all of you already knew this stuff. You're all incredibly intelligent individuals. And it turns out that one of the most amazing abilities as a human being is being able to subvert those instinctual behaviors and instead use reason and logic. But only when we acknowledge that it's happening. Now, this brings me to Steve. Now, full disclosure, I do work with Steve on the same podcasting network, Let Me Listen Podcasts. Check out my show Cine-Tific, it's fucking awesome. And he even gave me my first shout out when I was like 200 subscribers. So I don't hate Steve, I just disagree with him. A lot. And that will be an ongoing theme throughout this video. It's kind of an unspoken goal on this channel that you don't have to hate people just because they are horribly, unbelievably, shockingly, bewilderingly wrong. And just like many other people I watch and interact with on YouTube, I find Steve to be falling into that category rather often, to be kind. See, Steve and I have never been friends, but we have always been friendly, and that cordiality is going to continue here. I prefer to conduct this channel in a civilized, rational way when dealing with everybody. And though I do tend to get a little bit hyperbolic and ridiculous on some videos, most of you realize that if you've talked to me firsthand, I usually try to give people the benefit of the doubt and to talk to them and not tell them what to think. That being said, I'm going to refrain from attacking Steve personally, obviously, but his ideas just do not deserve the same respect. So let's get right into this, shall we?
Deadhead animation. Clinton is a 7. She's been proven to be behind election fraud in the primaries, is partially responsible for the war in Iraq, and wants to start a war with Russia. How can you justify a 7?
First, before I start the video, I'd just like to say that I do not appreciate Steve's dismissive handling of my question. I know it might seem like a minor gripe, but I truly believe that if a person with as much sway over an audience as Steve has is willing to answer a question that may help many people decide who they will vote for to be the leader of the free world for the next 4 years, I feel like that sort of question should require a more reasoned response than to be lumped into, well, basically a rapid fire question part of the video called the lightning round, where Steve answers, quote, rapid fire questions with glib inadequate answers, which I know is meant to be a joke, but is seemingly accurate when it comes to this topic. I know that this may have nothing to actually do with the argument, of course, but it does give me a generally frustrated feeling about how this video will go. I mean, he hasn't really said anything yet, and I already kind of feel condescended to. But maybe he has some slam dunk evidence against what I have to say, and it must be so good that it requires less than a minute to debunk. So I better listen up. Now, for context of this video, Steve gave Clinton a 7 out of 10 rating in his last video, and I disagreed strongly. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't support Trump. I personally think that he's a dangerous narcissist who wants to bomb innocent families of terrorists and would bring back torture if he could. He's a disaster, in my opinion. But so is Clinton. Some would even argue that she's kind of worse, since she's actually done or helped to do many of the things that Trump only talks about doing. And of course, here's some links as proof. I mean, I know that I haven't really given Steve a chance to say anything yet, but I never really feel like it's too early to start citing my sources. But anyway, Steve thinks Hillary is a solid 7 out of 10, so why not tell us why, Steve?
And Clinton is a 7. She's been proven to be behind election fraud in the primaries, is partially responsible for the war in Iraq, and wants to start a war with Russia. How can you justify a 7? Well, because the first one is not true. She was not proven to be behind election fraud in the primaries.
Oh, damn. I didn't realize I'd gotten it that wrong. Shit. Okay, well, here's my evidence, and maybe we can compare notes, and at the end we could judge for ourselves. Okay, so recently WikiLeaks has released thousands of government emails, and in those emails, many reporters have discovered some very interesting wheelings and dealings behind the scenes at the Hillary Clinton camp during the primaries. So, let's start with some facts, shall we? It looks like the DNC tended to give special treatment to Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders in many instances. Many such cases has to do with a person that we have not heard from in a while. Debbie Wasserman Schultz. The name that sends shivers down your spine. Now, Debbie was, until very recently, the head of the DNC, until she had to step down. Now, why did Debbie have to step down? Well, remember way back in July of 2016, just after the shit show that was the Nevada Democratic Convention? There was an email leak, if you remember, and it turns out that Debbie, who was Hillary's campaign manager back in 2008, was not partial in her role as the DNC chair. In fact, Debbie, who again was Hillary's campaign manager back in 2008 and was sitting DNC chair, and who is mandated by the charter to be non-partial, Wasserman Schultz, was caught writing about Jeff Weaver, manager of the Bernie Sanders campaign, that he was a, quote, damned liar, particularly scummy, and that he barely acknowledges the violent and threatening behavior that occurred. Of course, she was referring to the contentious Nevada convention fight between supporters of Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton over delegates, which actually was another fun way that the election was rigged in favor of Hillary Clinton, by the way. You see, the party's rules include the use of superdelegates, who disproportionately endorsed Clinton before the primaries even began, and are intended to provide the Democratic Party leverage over the election process. Almost every mainstream media outlet included superdelegates in the candidate delegate totals during the primary elections, despite the fact that superdelegates do not actually vote until the Democratic Convention, and may change their minds on who they're planning to vote for at any time before said convention. Nevertheless, many members of the mainstream media, including the Associated Press, NBC, CBS, and Politico, continued to misreport the candidate delegate totals by lumping the superdelegates into those totals, inflating Clinton's lead by over 400 delegates. And I don't know if you realize this, but this really creates a perception of insurmountability, which is specifically done in order to discourage would-be Sanders voters. But I'm sure you're sitting there saying, why, Aaron, that's preposterous. The media would never work with the DNC. That's just crazy tinfoil hat, unicorn fairy dust, and moonbeams. Except that I never did finish telling you the whole story about why Debbie had to step down. You see, back in May 2016, MSNBC's Mika Brzezinski called on Debbie Wasserman Schultz to step down after the DNC's bias against the Bernie Sanders campaign. And as you know, when you're accused of breaking the rules, you don't calmly explain how your accusers are wrong or own up to your actions and apologize. Hell no! The proper thing to do is to freak the fuck out about the negative coverage of your actions in the media and demand that the president of the media organization take down the story and apologize. Because that's what a rational, not completely guilty person would do. To be specific, Debbie emailed Chuck Todd such coverage of her, quote, must stop, describing the coverage as, quote, the last straw. And she ordered the DNC communications director to call MSNBC's president, Phil Griffin, to demand an apology from Brzezinski. And it turns out that once this was discovered from the WikiLeaks email drop, not the DNC, the Hillary Clinton campaign, nor Wasserman Schultz denied a single word of it, because it was true. And Debbie had to step down in shame. All of this happens to be on record, Steve, but you would think that it would stop there. Well, it turns out that we're barely scratching the surface on the fuckery that is the American political system. After all of this, you would think that the DNC had learned its lesson and would straighten up and fly right. But you would be very, very wrong. So the question now is, who filled Wasserman Schultz's election rigging boots? Why, it's none other than Donna Brazile, former CNN contributor and now head of the DNC. You know, the DNC that is supposed to be non-partial. Well, we have evidence that the DNC chair, Donna Brazile, who like I stated above is bound to be neutral by the charter, has not only supported Hillary Clinton, as stated in this email, as soon as the nomination is wrapped up, I'll be your biggest surrogate, but she has actually given Clinton the questions she would be asked all throughout the election. Here's a few. A March 12th email exchange shows Brazile stating, "From time to time I get the questions in advance. And I'll send a few more," though some questions Roland submitted. A March 5th email shows that she shared a question with the Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta and communications director Jennifer Palmieri that was to be asked on a March 6th debate hosted by CNN in Flint, Michigan that read, "One of the questions directed to HRC tomorrow is from a woman with a rash, and her family has lead poison, and she will ask what, if anything, will Hillary do as president to help the people of Flint." But this is just the former and current heads of the DNC working with the media to give Hillary the edge over Bernie. You know, rigging the election. But what about the rest of the DNC? Well, in March 2016, Democratic official and former New York statesman Mark Allen Siegel was caught advising the Clinton campaign as stated in this email here. So if we give Bernie this in the convention's rules committee, his people will think they've won something from the party establishment. And it functionally doesn't make any difference anyway. They win, we don't lose. Everyone is happy. So basically he's saying that if we give Bernie some table scraps, he'll be happy and go away. And I don't know if you've realized this so far, but all of this kind of points towards the narrative that there was most certainly collusion with the Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC, and the media, specifically CNN, whose parent company, Time Warner, donated over $800,000 to the Hillary Clinton campaign and is one of her top 10 donors, and by definition has a vested interest in her winning the election. Because, let's face it, no one gives almost $1 million to a person out of the goodness of their own heart, but in fact, usually expects to see a return on their investment. But the real nail in the coffin is the April 2015 email confirming that the DNC and the Clinton campaign coordinated to rig the debate schedule for Clinton. Drop the fucking mic. The email read, "Through internal discussions, we concluded that it was in our interest to 1. Limit the number of debates and the number in each state. 2. Start the debates as late as possible. 3. Keep the debates out of the busy window between February 1st and February 27th, 2016, which was Iowa and South Carolina." And this was an email from Charlie Baker, a senior advisor to the Clinton campaign from the Dewey Square Group. He went on to say, "And the other campaigns have advocated, not surprisingly, for more debates and for the schedule to start significantly earlier, because those things would help their campaign." But coincidentally, it turns out that the debate schedule was in fact set up exactly how the Hillary Clinton campaign demanded it be set up. How funny! How could that have? What a crazy coincidence! I just can't believe it. So, to a reasonable person, all of this is pretty damning. And when you couple this with the very real fact that the debates were held at times when the least amount of people would watch, the pre-ejaculatory declarations of victory a full day before the votes were even counted, rules set up by the DNC Elections Committee making it extremely difficult for non-party preference voters, who would majority vote Bernie, to have their votes counted, a seemingly deliberate mismanagement of training for the people working at the polling places throughout the country, the various studies done proving that Hillary won with larger margins in places susceptible to election fraud. Oh, and not to mention Debbie Wasserman Schultz! Sorry, I said that I'd try to keep it level-headed. Anyway, now please present me with your counter-argument, Steve. I'm sure that it's amazing.
She was not proven to be behind election fraud in the primaries. I cannot find a single credible source that says that or that makes that case. That is hyperbole at best and just flat out false at worst.
You can't find a single credible source? Like, I don't know, the actual emails sent by the people doing the rigging? But to Steve's credit, I was slightly mistaken when I said that she was involved in election fraud. Let's look at the definition, shall we? Election fraud, or election manipulation, or voter rigging, is illegal interference with the process of an election. Acts of fraud affect vote counts to bring about an election result whereby increasing the vote share of a favored candidate, depressing the vote share of the rival candidate, or both. Well, it seems like a pretty clear-cut case. Holding the debates on the days that they did, closing down polling places, and the whole non-affiliated party thing is by definition depressing the vote share of a rival candidate. And the DNC helped the Hillary Clinton campaign do this, when they're not supposed to show favoritism between either candidate at all. So I guess that we can pretty much close the book on this, right? Well, it also says what constitutes electoral fraud under the law varies from country to country. And of course, as all of you know, the establishment does a very good job at trying to always sustain plausible deniability. And since the United States political system is so obviously corrupted, I'm sure that those weasel politicians will find a loophole that somehow makes all of this completely by the book. But is that what you really want to settle for in your democracy? Does that seem like a fair election when the only way that you can win is to use your corrupt establishment friends in the government, media, and Wall Street to tip the scales in your favor? Is that really what you want a free and fair election to look like? Call me old-fashioned, but I say no. And by the way, I would have to say that if a paper trail left by the people directly involved in the scandal we're talking about is somehow hyperbole, then I'm a 15-foot invisible dragon with AIDS breath. That's hyperbole. Oh, and if you think Steve addresses any of those topics, he doesn't. We just move to the next one.
She is partially responsible for the war in Iraq in the sense that she voted for it when she was in the Senate. She now says that she regrets that vote, that she would not vote that way if given the chance today. She thinks the Iraq war was a bad idea, so I give her credit for that, for realizing she made a mistake and changing her mind.
Okay, Steve, I honestly can't tell at this point if this is willful ignorance or simply blind acceptance of a patently misleading direction of argumentation that I hear all too often from Hillary supporters. She changed her mind, so that means she evolved on the issue. That's a good thing, right? Well, in a vacuum, I would agree with you, Steve. But Hillary has evolved her position on everything. She has flip-flopped on so many issues that it has actually become a popular topic for top 10 lists. Just look at this. And the GOP has an entire webpage dedicated to it. Look at this. My finger is literally getting tired from scrolling. Not only has she flipped on such important issues as the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the $15 minimum wage as popular examples, she has also flip-flopped on if she supports gay marriage. And not in 1992 or something. She thought that it should be illegal for gay people to marry in 2014. That was like fucking yesterday. And the funny thing is that almost every Republican has come out at this point and said that it was a bad idea too. Does that mean that they're all fit to lead the Democratic Party and represent progressive values? Fuck no! The fact is that Hillary has supported almost every single military intervention proposed since she got into power. They don't call her a war hawk because it's a cute nickname. It's because she has aided in the murder of innocent civilians all over the world. And here's some more links.
And I don't think she wants to start a war with Russia. Again, I think that is taking an incredibly uncharitable and quite biased view of Clinton's views. I don't think she would start a war with Russia, and I don't think that if she had the chance to avoid a war with Russia, that she would take an action that would start a war with Russia.
Biased? You're calling me biased? I disagree, Steve. It seems to me that you're kind of overlooking evidence in favor of what many consider to be a monumentally flawed candidate, and you're calling her a 7 out of 10. I don't know if that's biased, but it's definitely confusing, especially when we consider that the root of my question was why do you think that she is a 7? And to that end, you never really answered my question. But pertaining to Russia, I in fact gave you the evidence directly in the question. To be fair, I amended the question with this part later that day, so I'm not going to make assumptions that Steve just neglected to read it, but if you scroll down one line, you would see that I wrote this. Many experts claim that imposing a no-fly zone unilaterally over Russia that would likely never gain a Security Council mandate would be a declaration of war on Russia as well as on Assad. Given that the Syrian government and the Russians have a monopoly of air power over Aleppo, going on the offensive against Russia in this way could start another Cold War. Steve, dude, just because you don't believe that she wants to start a war with Russia doesn't mean that it's true, man. I can disbelieve that the Earth is round or that gravity doesn't exist too, but if I jump off a cliff and try to fly, I sure as fuck am not going to do so. I gotta know. I gotta know. What do you think a no-fly zone means, dude? Do you think that they'll just ask the heavily armed gunplanes and helicopters occupying that airspace to just go away? No. They have to show air supremacy by firing down the planes who violate the no-fly zone. I don't mean to be so terribly rude, but this isn't a fucking pillow fight, Steve. This is war. And you're talking about a person who is supposedly an expert on foreign policy, but wants to potentially put us back into the fucking Cold War. Oh, and by the way, have you ever wondered why Hillary loves war so much? Well, I'm pretty sure that it has nothing to do with the donations to her campaign from the defense contractors.
And hopefully she doesn't start a war with Russia, or Russia doesn't start a war with us, because that would suck.
Indeed it would, Steve. Indeed it would. Anyway, that's it for this video. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but just remember that a vote for your principles or even a third-party candidate is way better than a vote for a lesser evil, in my opinion. But like I said, you are all smart, capable people who do not need to be treated like fucking children and told who to vote for. If you like this video, please rate, comment, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already, and if you like what we do here and you want to be a part of the show, please check us out on Patreon, and, as always, keep evolving.